Okay, that's 3:00 now. So because this is again a sutta, I'm going to do the Namo Tassa before. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. So I'm going to continue on with the Anapanasati Sutta as the Buddha taught it. And I just went back to the previous 4 stages of Anapanasati because I wanted to point out, especially the word. Is that okay? Okay. Okay. Okay, make sure you can see. The word of what you're actually doing. In the first stage of Anapanasati, when the in and breath are out, when in breath and out breath are long, you are aware that they are long. What you are doing, you're aware in particular of the breath and its length. When in breath and out breath are short, you're aware that they are short. When you learn to experience the whole of the breath as you breathe in and out. When you learn to calm the breath as you breathe in and out. And the words used there are very much about the awareness of the breath. But when you come down to the 5th, 6th, 7th and 8th stages of Anapanasati, they use different words here. You're not mindful of the breath as you are learning to experiencing the joy, the pleasure, the whole mental formation, and lastly learning to calm all this down. These are different words, because many times people say, aren't I supposed to be aware of the breath all the time? Yes, in one way, but it's a particular aspect of the breathing, not just a feeling of the breath going in and going out. In these last 4, you're experiencing the joy, the pleasure, and the mental formation. The joy and pleasure coming together here. And you can see the word they use here, you learn to experience this. And I point that out because you don't just sit there watching the breath, watching the breath go in, breath go out. That is not the main point of these 5th, 6th, 7th and 8th steps. 5th, 6th and 7th and 8th steps. You're learning to experience joy as you're breathing in and out. Yes, it is the breath which appears joyful, but it's you who are learning how to perceive that happiness and joy, and not just watching the breath anymore. It comes up naturally, but nevertheless many people dismiss it as there's something wrong. You're enjoying meditation. I know when I was young, whenever you went to any religious function, you were supposed to be suffering. I don't know about you, but I remember I mentioned earlier that I liked going to church because it was a nice little earner for me when I was singing in weddings. But nevertheless, the wooden pews were always hard, and the walls were always out of stone and freezing cold. And it wasn't really a joyful place when I was young. So a lot of times people have got this idea that if you do what monks do and nuns do, like meditating, it has to be painful. They even said, no pain, no gain. But the opposite is true in meditation. We're supposed to develop this and learn how to experience this joy and this pleasure as you breathe in and out. And how this happens, yes, it is a natural occurrence, but when you start to notice it, don't try and get rid of it. Don't think I must be doing something wrong, I'm enjoying myself. Instead, you just leave it alone, let it be. The more calm you are, the more that joy and pleasure come up. It's built even stronger from letting go. The more peaceful you are, just the more that piti and sukha increase in their power. Already one of you last night, they did ask the question, what's the difference between the piti and sukha? It's not something you can explain again in words. And in fact, many times people try and write essays or PhDs on the difference between joy and pleasure, this piti and sukha. But one of the things you can say, the only way that you will know the difference between piti and sukha for yourself is once you've actually got into the deeper jhanas and you know the difference between the second jhana and the third jhana. How do you know what a thing actually is? It's a simile which I haven't said in this retreat yet, but many of you have heard me say before. It's how does a fish know what water is? It cannot know, because water has always been around it all the time. So a fish just can't really understand the nature of water. It's always there. And except a tadpole. This is my tadpole simile. A tadpole can get to understand what water is. Like a fish, the water is always around that tadpole. But then one day, the tadpole starts to grow appendages. It starts to turn into a frog. It grows arms and legs. And one day that frog, now a frog, doesn't really know what he's doing. But he jumps. And then he's out of the lake, squatting on dry land. Maybe you can try and imagine what that must be like to a frog the first time it's jumped out of the lake. It's nothing like it's ever experienced before. Something which had always been there has now gone. Water. Now for the first time, the frog has an opportunity to understand what water is once it's gone. And that simile should give you a bit of an important clue, a direction to understand why in these meditations things are disappearing. And deeper into the meditation, even this thing we call piti and sukha start to disappear. Again, this is especially between the second and third jhana. The thing we call piti vanishes. And the pleasure which is left is the sukha. That's all you can say to explain this, because we don't have sufficient words in English to know the difference between joy and pleasure. All I can say is that they are both intense enough. You enjoy yourself to the max, even obviously in a second jhana. You don't have to worry about which is which. Sometimes it's like if ever you go walking in the mountains and you get to one peak. When on the top of that one peak, you think that's the top, that's the summit of everything. But once you're at the top of that peak, then you can see another peak, which is higher still. Only when you get to the first peak, you can understand what the second peak is. So, but nevertheless, when you learn to experience joy as you breathe in and out, when you learn to experience pleasure as you breathe in and out, when you learn to experience the mental formation of piti sukha as you breathe in and out, and when you learn to calm this mental formation as you breathe in and out, on those occasions you are mindful of experience, Vedana, the second satipatthana, having restrained the 5 hindrances, energized, fully aware of the purpose and mindful. for being mindful of the pleasure associated with this stage of breath meditation is being mindful of experience. That is why on this occasion a meditator abides mindful of experience, having restrained the 5 hindrances, energized, fully aware of the purpose, and mindful. In this, I've mentioned the key to understanding this path, an anapanasati. It was for me anyway. When you look at when you look at the 3rd and 4th stages of this tetrad, this group of 4, they learn to experience a mental formation and learn to calm the mental formation at this time. A mental formation means that this experience of piti sukha is not really created by a bodily feeling. It's the citta sankhara, the mental formation. This is where the way the mind experiences the breath is the main way that you see the breath. It kind of changes. Yeah, it's a breath going in and breath going out, you can know that much. But it is the way the mind experiences much more than the way the body experiences it. And that is where the piti and sukha originate from. And of course, I've mentioned this to you before, that with the simile of just looking at the beautiful bamboo flooring, or one of the first times again this happened to me when I was doing walking meditation in the hall in Thailand during the rains retreat. It was the only place which was dry enough to do walking meditation. And it was just a concrete floor laid by the villagers. It wasn't even that smooth, but nevertheless, when you are walking backwards and forwards on this floor, walking slowly, because there's too much to be aware of in the movement of the legs and the feet. As I was walking, and slower, just to be able to have time to know everything which was going on in my legs, that one particular part of that concrete floor, I had to stop, totally stop, because what I saw was just, again, incredible. It's beautiful. And it was the most beautiful piece of concrete I've ever seen in my life. This was quite a few years ago before the toilet experience here. It was one of the first times you could see something which was, no one else could see that was beautiful, because the beauty wasn't in the concrete, it wasn't in the sight. It was what the mind added to it. It was a citta sankhara I was experiencing. That's why it looked delightful. And I couldn't move for about 10 minutes just enjoying this amazing work of art. And that is standard. It's a citta sankhara. It's how the mind sees the breath at this time, because the mind has enough stillness and energy to really see it thoroughly and beautifully. Just how your mind works. How all minds work. It's not just weird monk minds or nun minds. It's everybody's mind. And so I'm sure that many of you have been meditating for a long time. You must have had some times when you're sitting there meditating and it feels really good. The experience is delightful. And you will also know that when you come out of the meditation, you have energy. You're bright and happy. That's one of the reasons why I shouldn't say this when there was one of my monks sitting at the end of the line. But if you want to ask me for some special privilege, you want to go visit your parents or you need something special, it's not in the stores, please come on one of these retreats, and when you see I'm getting very, very peaceful and happy, then when I come out of meditation, then ask me. If you want me to go back to Hong Kong for a visit, wait until I'm just really blissed out. You can see a big silly smile on my face. Then ask me. You're much happier at that time. And of course, oh yeah, it doesn't matter where you are, okay. But that's actually how you feel. Just very light, very beautiful, and very amenable. So you are experiencing what happiness is and where it comes from. But is it just that? No. Because as you're experiencing joy and pleasure with the breath, and as you learn to experience this together and realizing it's a mental formation, it's coming from the way the citta, the mind, experiences the breath now. And then you learn to calm that citta sankhara, make it more even, more still, until you find the next stage of the meditation. Yes, you are breathing in and breathing out, but you're not watching the breath the way you usually watch it. The simile is, suppose, it's only suppose, don't be scared, Della. Suppose that Della was so inspired at the end of this retreat, she decided to ordain as a bhikkhuni. And then we quickly took her to Dharmasara monastery. It can't be done, there's lots of rules and regulations, but then when she came back here, she had her hair cut off and she was a fully ordained bhikkhuni. Maybe samaneri you can kind of do. When she came in here, how many of you would recognize her? Very few. The reason is because in some of the ways you recognize someone like Della, and when she's ordained the first time, she actually looks different. Even just many times when ordinations, which I have performed at, you find the person who's ordained, say it was Freddie. You go into the back room, then you put on a robe, and when you come out afterwards, you haven't done any more shaving than you had before, but you look different. Just the fact that you've got a brown robe instead of a pair of trousers and a jacket on, it does actually make a lot of difference to you. Sometimes you won't recognize. So if Della came back here and she was a bhikkhuni, said, "Who are you?" "I'm Della." "No, you're not." And you look again, "Oh, okay." That's like when you see the breath through the mind, or you see the breath through the usual sense, the physical sense of touch. It starts to appear different. It's the same thing you're looking at, but through a different sense door. That's why it looks quite different. So it's the same object you're looking at, but your perception of it has changed. The way you perceive it, it looks beautiful. Just like the bamboo floor. If I haven't been meditating much that day, or I come here for the first time, or messing around with the computer here, you look at that floor, it's just the ordinary floor. It's only after the mind starts to get strong, you can see it, and it looks totally different, gorgeous. So this is what we're doing in the 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th stages of the breath meditation. We call it breath meditation, but it starts to look very, very different now. You're experiencing the joy and the bliss associated with the breathing. And that gets stronger. First you're just experiencing it, and then the 7th and 8th factors, you are learning to experience the whole of the mental formation of bliss, and then you are calming it down. Calming it down doesn't mean like softening the experience of peace, but just evening it out, making it kind of consistent, making it almost unchanging. And those are the things which are important. When things stop changing, the whole experience gets stronger and stronger, and the in and outness of the breath kind of vanish. You're experiencing the breath, but just the joy of the breath, which is pretty constant. and strong. I don't know how many times you've heard of people meditating, going out into the forests, into the caves, up into the deserts, and blissing out. These hermits. This is what you're supposed to be doing. How on earth can you exist in these very lonely places, sometimes physically harsh places, unless you have this beautiful joy inside of you? And it's not just, again, it's just having a good time. It's much deeper than that, lasting long periods of time. This becomes the 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th stages of the breath meditation. And then we go to the 9th stage of the breath meditation. The physical touch stuff is just about gone now. And in the 9th stage of the breath meditation, the physical sense has gone. When you learn to experience the citta as you breathe in and out, that's what it says in the Sutta. Experience the citta. What are you experiencing? What is the citta? I'm always kind of amazed. Many times people do the 4 stages of Satipatthana, the 4 focuses of mindfulness. And the 3rd one is the citta. Most people who do these 4 stages of mindfulness, or 4 focuses of mindfulness, basically haven't got a clue what the citta is. First of all, the first time you can experience a citta, it appears as a beautiful light in the mind. Not the breath going in and going out. That light is called the nimitta. I don't know how many times people have said, oh, the Buddha never taught like that. And so the last couple of times I've done suttas, I've always taught the Upakalesa Sutta. And that last part of the Upakalesa Sutta is the Buddha talking about how to deal with the problems which can come out with nimittas. This is usually experienced by people who see these beautiful lights in the mind. And I always prefer to encourage people to experience these nimittas as a light, even though it is not a light. It's a mental object, it's not a visual object you're experiencing. But I also mentioned to you that it's so difficult to find words to describe these things which very few people experience, which we don't have a language for. We don't have a vocabulary for it. But nevertheless, the closest you have to this experience is like a light in the mind. And I wondered why the light nimittas were the most not popular, but the usual ones which people see these nimittas as lights. And it is because we are mostly visual people. You know, you're identified when you go through passport control by what you look like. Your figure of your face in your passport. I recognize you not by how you smell, Freddie, by what you look like. And you can't just recognize someone by how they feel when you touch them, and that becomes illegal. But now how do we know a person? How do we know our life? How do we know jhana growth? It's mostly just by visual data. So because the visual data is our strongest, most used sense, it became obvious to me that when you see these nimittas, these pure mind objects, that they usually are beautiful lights. And I did mention to you just about the pleasure of those lights. They're gorgeous. But also, even the colour of those lights. The particular colour you are aware of is not important, whether it's yellow, green, blue or whatever. But what kind of is important, if ever you experience one of these nimittas, you will notice that whatever colour it is, it's more intense than anything you can see in the real world. Like, the colour of your monster there. I don't know what it really is, but hello monster, it's waving his hand at me. Your little teddy bear there. What actually is it? Is it a monster or what? Anyway, whatever it is, it's a very bright yellow. If you see a yellow nimitta, it's much more pure, more yellow than yellow. That's one of the words you can try to describe it. Not a yellow you can see in anything in the real world. More pure, more deep, more intense, more beautiful. And that's a typical description of these nimittas. If it's like a blue, you have never seen this blue in any picture book at all. It's more pure than blue, deeper blue than blue. And if anyone starts to describe it like that, and it's okay, yeah, that's a nimitta. It's seen with the mind, not with the eyes. And you try and get some description of it, and it's tough. And it's usually just the nearest sight which you have seen, the nearest colour, the nearest even shape. The other thing with, and I'll wait until we get on to the, later on the Upakalesa Sutta, there's some more little tricks in there, dhammas taught by the Buddha about these nimittas. But that's the first time you're actually experiencing the citta. You see it for what it is. The sixth sense, separated from the other five senses. Normally, this nimitta is experienced, but most times, the first time it happens, people are still a little bit sensitive to the other five senses. They haven't fully turned off yet. So sometimes you can maybe hear a sound or feel a sense in the body, but it's usually, if it's going to be a real nimitta, that five sense world is pretty soft and subdued. Of course, you can see those nimittas, this citta, even though the five senses are still active but in the background, but subdued. If that mind has really been empowered, if their intensity, their energy is very bright, sometimes, of course, they will be too powerful for the other five senses. An example of this, I know this monk who just was getting into a few nimittas, getting into a few of these deep meditations, and his mind was so empowered when he came out of the jhanas, had to go for lunch. It was like eating your lunch through this beautiful light. Nimitta hadn't disappeared, it was dominant in the sensory field. At least that's what it appeared like. It didn't go, but you can still do enough to see your spoon and put it through the nimitta into your mouth. It may sound weird to you, but that's kind of what happens. The nimitta is so strong it hasn't gone. But the other five senses are still active just enough for you to do your worldly duties. I hope that makes sense, and I'm not going too deep for you. But that's a good description of it. And so usually this nimitta appears when the five senses are subdued. Please do not worry about this, because each one of you, I guarantee, will experience a nimitta. Guaranteed. After you die. If not earlier. It's much better to be earlier. Have you never heard these tales of people who pass away? They go floating up towards this nimitta, this light. One of the good examples of that And life is always weird, but I'll tell you about the weird part of the story at this very end. About a couple of years ago, there's a book released from this Indian lady who lived in Hong Kong. What was her name? Anita Moorjani. She was a Buddhist? No. I don't think she really held to any religion, but afterwards she certainly did. I think she was a Catholic before. Hindu. Yeah, Hindu. But anyhow, Anita Moorjani had terrible cancers. She was a successful woman, and no one really knew what the cause was. And sometimes we don't know what the cause of cancers are, because they're there. And she'd had many operations, and this last operation, it was, touch and go. They thought she had died on the operating table. And when she came conscious again, the first thing she said, "I'm cured. Cancer's gone." And she's still under the effect of the anesthesia. So the doctors never really took her seriously. But then when she started saying what they had been doing during the operation, it kind of stunned her. "You were anesthetized at that point. Aren't you unconscious?" She said, "No, I wasn't." She was floating out of her body. And that was the first piece of evidence which kind of convinced them what was happening. And then she said that during her experience, she floated up towards the light, and as she got closer and closer to that beautiful light, she went into that light, and then a lot of bliss, a lot of happiness. And as she came out, she had this deep insight. Her insight was the cause of her cancer. And she knew, without any doubt, that that cancer was caused by trying to live up to other people's expectations. She was an amazing woman, very successful, very kind, and many people liked her, but that just made her try even harder to meet other people's expectations, wants for her. And that stress was what was causing the cancer. And once she saw that, and she understood what the cause was, she also understood what the remedy was. So the next thing apparently she said to the doctors when she came out of the anesthesia was that, "I'm cured, the cancer's gone." And again, that almost reassured her she was crazy, because there were still tumours in her body. But they rapidly disappeared. And she was right. She was cured, very much alive. And that experience, the way she described it, she said it was union with God. Why did she say that? Because imagine when you go into one of these nimittas and then further into Ajahn, it's like you'd have to disappear first of all. Your perception of who you are totally vanishes. And when that perception of you totally vanishes, automatically, you don't do it. When that vanishes, you merge into this beautiful light. And as you go into that light, your sense of self is not there anymore. But this great energy is there. And if you come from a theistic background, of Catholicism, or say Hinduism, what you would say was that's a union with God. And a lot of times this kind of fascinated me. You started reading some of these people who were from the theistic religions, and they started saying, this is a union with God. What did it feel like? What happened afterwards? what was the cause of it? And I already mentioned that one statement in the Christian Bible, be still and know that thou art God. Very few priests can actually explain what the heck that means. Buddhist monks understand that perfectly. It's when you are still, stillness is the cause for things to disappear. When things disappear, you let them disappear and you're not afraid they're going for a while, they'll come back again. And then when you really get still, this is when you perceive the object of your mind as this beautiful light. And you merge into that light. When you merge into that light, that becomes a jhana. That's how the Buddha described it. When you come out again, your mind is so empowered, you get insights. You don't just get insights as how beautiful the bamboo floor is. You get more interesting insights. And what's the most important insight for that lady was about the cause of her cancer. And you always get it right. And the other thing was, she knew it was the cause. There was no doubt there. And that's the other important thing, was when you emerge, from those experiences. The way it's said in Buddhism, your 5 hindrances are not there at all afterwards. They've been turned off, subdued, totally, for a long period of time. So whatever you experience after that always comes with this certainty that this is true. There is no doubt at all. She had no doubt that the cancer had gone, or the cause of it had, and soon the body followed and was free of the cancer. But the main reason I'm saying this is just what that light is and how powerful it is. Be careful, because later on, when I will start talking about the Upakilesa Sutta, the problems associated with this stage of meditation nimittas, you will also find that there's a lot of fear comes up. This is very big stuff in the spiritual path. Huge power, energy, bliss, light. And obviously it comes up with a lot of fear. I'm just going to go off on a little tangent here, but it's kind of interesting. It's one of the reasons why monks or nuns who do possess some powers do not show them. We're not hiding them just because we haven't got them. It's quite the opposite. There was this one monk who I knew very well, and he was Indonesian. Did any of you ever meet Venerable Sudamo? Anyone did? No, I did. A few times. Because when I first saw him, I remember walking with another friend, and when I was a monk, getting to be senior monk now, over in Wat Bawon in Thailand, in Bangkok. And as soon as I saw him, you realize, I remember I said to the other monk who was with me, that is a very powerful monk. And I got that intuition right. And later on he told me his story. He was a layman, and he wanted to be a rishi, was one of these like hermits, not necessarily a monk. And so he found a quiet place in the jungles of Java. There were real jungles in Java in those days. This must have been about 40 years ago. And he went into that jungle and found a nice quiet place to meditate. And his experience was this. He's passed away now, that's why I don't mind telling you his name. If he was alive, many of you will try and find out where is he, to go and check him out. And so anyway, he's passed away now. So he went into the jungle, found a nice place, crossed his legs, and sat down in meditation. And as he was sitting in meditation, he got very, very peaceful. And then the most important part of that meditation when he saw a star, that's what he said, like a star appear in his mind. A very beautiful light. And as he said it, as he described it, like searching for words to describe what he felt at the time, he said he married that star. Now, I don't know if that was because of his English was his second language, but certainly you can understand what that was. He totally united with it. Not some marriage like a man to a woman. It was like two beings, not even two beings, but going right inside of that nimitta. And then what happened? About 7 or 8 days later, it was when he came out of that meditation. Not just, just half an hour. And when he came out of that meditation, he noticed that the jungle where he was sitting looked different than when he'd first started sitting there. He had no idea of time, but he just got up, walked to the nearest village, and when they heard where he was sitting, that was when they told him there had been a flash flood there. And where he'd been sitting, he was underwater for many days. It didn't matter at all to him. In those deep meditations, you may think I'm being crazy, but you are invulnerable. There's even, you can ask me now whether this is, some Sri Lankan disciples. There's a little group who meditated together, and one of them used to get into deep meditation very easily. They're lay people, a lay group. And the head of this group, I don't mind even saying his name for you, Dr. Setanayaka. He's a doctor in the Sri Lankan military. And he decided to do an experiment when this young man was in deep meditation. He just pushed up the sleeve of his arm and not anesthetized, I keep making that mistake, sterilized his arm, put some alcohol on it or something just to sterilize it. He was a doctor, he knew what he was doing. And then he got out a scalpel and tried to cut through the flesh of this student. And the scalpel would not penetrate. And he made a little recording of it, video of it, and it would not penetrate. And then he took the student out of meditation, or the student came out of the meditation, and then he told him what he'd done. And the student hadn't felt anything. No pressure on his arm. Obviously there was no wound there because the scalpel hadn't penetrated. And then he told the student, would you mind if I do it again, this time with your permission? And the student trusted this disciple, trusted his teacher so much, he said yes. And when he got into a deep meditation again, he lifted up the sleeve of the arm, and he said, sterilized, got it right this time, sterilized the skin, and then took out the scalpel, and this time the scalpel penetrated. There was no anesthesia, just sterilization. And this young man was just meditating there, it's like nothing was happening. And then the doctor cleaned up the wound, put a few stitches in, and then put a bandage on it, and waited for the young man to come out of meditation, which he did after about 20-30 minutes. And he could feel that something had happened there, but all the time when you were having an incision done on your arm, without any anesthesia, he couldn't feel a thing. This is kind of what happens in meditation, in the deep meditations. Even in the suttas, you can check this out if you wish, about the monk in the time of the Buddha who was meditating in the jungles. And when he was in the forest meditating, some villagers came by. They were searching for mushrooms or something in the jungle, and they saw this monk sitting perfectly still. I mean, really perfectly still. I mean, too still. They thought he died. And so they thought, they were Buddhists, so it's not right, to leave this monk to be eaten by the jungle animals. And they were in the forest anyway. There's plenty of dead wood around. So they collected some of that dead wood together, made a pyre, put the monk on top, and set light to the pile of wood. Apparently they knew some chanting, not much, it's probably the wrong chanting anyway, but they thought, well, it's something we can do. So they did some chanting, and then they set the pyre alight. And then, you are busy people. You can't just wait around for the few hours needed to burn the body. So they went off to collect their mushrooms. They'd done their duty. And according to this sutta in the, I think is it Samyutta, I think, or the Anguttara? I forget exactly where. But anyway, I can find that out for you if you're really interested. But then you can imagine the village the following morning when that monk came into the village on arms round. Not even his robes were charred. Perfectly alive. You are invulnerable. If, say, Freddie gets into a jhana, we think he's dead, so we send him to the crematorium, and we put him in this little oven with all the gas burning really hot. Imagine what would happen when the crematorium supervisors open the door, to take your ashes out, and find Freddie is still there. Hello, hi. I'm not just saying this is true. So anyway, that was this Anita Murajani. The strange thing about that Anita Murajani's case was her GP. Her GP was a doctor called it's George, isn't it? George Walker. Sorry? Yeah. Because George Walker, after that experience, he decided he was actually Australian, working in Hong Kong at the time. So he decided to migrate back to Australia. And he got a nice job as a GP in a surgery in a town called Serpentine, Western Australia. He's our local doctor. He's my GP. Honestly. I'd ever go to see him. He's also a politician as well. The last time I saw him when there was an event over in the Parliament House here. Look, not even me can make up stories like that. That is real. It's weird. How come he ended up here? He's a Buddhist now. And Johnny Walker was the guy who made the alcohol. Dr. Walker, anyway. So I should go and see my GP more often. Then I get his name right. So anyway, it's a weird world. But anyway, that whole experience changed this doctor's idea of what life is and how life works and about this nature of this citta. And okay, if you don't believe me, wait until you die. And if I'm wrong, you know where I live. Your ghost will be welcome to come and tell me off. That's how kind of confident I am. So anyway, you learn to experience the citta as you breathe in and out. Actually, by this time you hardly know what the breath is up to. It doesn't say you're experiencing the breath, you experience the citta now, the mind. In the next couple, you learn how to brighten the nimitta. This is my translation, because the word is abhipamojayang cittang, which means bring more joy to the citta. It also means bringing like confidence to the nimitta, not doubting it, bring it so joy that just let it be and let it grow. And then the nimitta becomes incredibly beautiful. There's a couple of problems people have with nimittas. One is that, again, I mentioned yesterday, it's so joyful, one of the most pleasurable things you've ever experienced. And you may get that experience that, I can't take any more pleasure. You heard that from a monk. Monks are supposed to live an ascetic life. That's what you expect. But then you get incredible senses of joy from this path. And the other thing is sometimes that nimitta becomes so incredibly bright. And then the only way you can describe it is like looking at the sun in midday in Australia with your eyes wide open. You think, it's too bright, I'll go blind. It's not a light. It's the way, it's a mental object you interpret as being close to a light. So you don't go blind, it can be as bright as you want. It's no danger to your health at all. And that's actually that stage you learn to brighten the nimitta, make it stronger. And then you learn to settle the nimitta. Actually the word is samadhahang cittang. To literally like samadhi it. And it's at this point when that argument, which I hope people understand already, the word samadhi does not mean concentration. Concentration is just an unfortunate translation which people made. It's like you to settle it, to bring it to stillness. This nimitta will be moving around when you first see it. Sometimes it goes up here, up there, expands or goes inside itself. It can always be moving. And your job is to learn how to let it be so much it becomes totally still. And that's what it means, samadhahang cittang. Samadhi is one of the key words for meditation, not concentration, not insight meditation, but stillness. And then that nimitta becomes so powerful, so still. And then you get to the next stage of the anapanasati, the 12th stage. You can see it down there, when you learn to enter the jhana. The word in Pali is vimoccayang cittang, to liberate the mind. And actually another thing you will see again and again and again, that when you read those suttas in Pali, they call this liberation vimoccang. Vimoccayang is like the verb, a verb associated with vimokha. And vimokha is always referring to the jhana experiences. So when it says to liberate the citta, vimoccayang cittang, it is to bring it into the jhana. So it's so still, and you experience what these jhanas are. You experience it. On those occasions you are mindful of the citta, having restrained the 5 hindrances, energized, fully aware of the purpose and mindful. I do not say that there is the development of mindfulness of breathing for one who is dull, who is not fully aware. And it's reaching the jhanas when the hindrances are gone means fully aware. That is why on the occasion the meditator abides mindful of the mind, citta, having restrained the 5 hindrances, energized, fully aware of the purpose and mindful. And that becomes the 12 stages of anapanasati. Now I'm happy that I've finished it a little bit earlier, because I don't want to go on yet until tomorrow, because I'm going to introduce another sutta tomorrow, the Nalakarpana Sutta, and it's an important point to emphasize from there. I always have to be careful when I'm discussing Dhamma, because the tendency was to say it's important to stress this. We're supposed to be overcoming stress. Stress is like a bad word, but it means like here to emphasize. This other sutta is what happens and how the hindrances, what the hindrances are, how they're overcome. And it's only when that 5 hindrances are overcome, and a couple of others too get overcome, and then when they're overcome, you can actually trust what your experience was. But that's for tomorrow. I've just done the 12 stages, the first 12 stages of Anapanasati. Being mindful of the breath, long or short. That's the first 2. And remember yesterday I emphasized, you don't have to do 1 and then 2. Either is good enough, just to get sort of kind of into the breath. And then to see the whole body of the breath from the beginning to end. It's a full awareness, not just a partial awareness. And then to calm that breath down. It becomes nice and smooth. Then afterwards you'll experience the arising of piti and sukha. Don't have to worry which one. You can experience both. Just joy and pleasure and happiness with the breathing. You feel really good. And then it becomes experiencing the mental formation of piti sukha. That becomes what you're mostly aware of now. You may think it's the breath. It is kind of the breath, but it's how the mind experiences the breath. It's the breath experienced through the 6th sense. And then you calm that. How do you calm it? You don't do anything. You let it settle down. You give it the opportunity to settle down. That idea of you don't do things, you let things happen. And then when the breath really settles down, then these beautiful lights appear in the mind, the nimitta. If anybody experiences nimitta through one of the, and interpret it through one of the other senses, like a sound or a physical feeling, that's legitimate, but it makes it a little bit more difficult to take it further, because looking at the nimitta as a light is far easier to work with. And then, when you're experiencing that nimitta, this beautiful light in the mind, then you bring it into basically brighten it up, and then you stabilize it, and then the mind just goes right inside and go into jhanas. So that's where I wanted to finish, but I would love to open it up for a few questions before I leave here to do the interviews. So, questions, please. Or have I bamboozled you again? Oh, yeah, good.
To what extent should we restrain the 5 hindrances? Because at the very beginning stages of this sutta, we assume we haven't attained jhana yet, but we still have to restrain the hindrances. But to what extent, to what level we should restrain that 5 hindrances?
Just to the grosser level. Just restrain it at the grosser level. So you just got like wanting. Just when you're here, what do you want here? You're very happy, you've got enough to eat, a nice soft bed, you've got all of what in Buddhism we call the 4 requisites. You've got clothing, food, lodging, and medicines if you need them. So see if you could lessen the wanting, and also just to lessen just any negativity. I'm sure you can go around this hall with what we call a fault-finding mind, always liking seeing the mistakes bricks which are chipped on the outside. You can look at all of the light bulbs which need replacing. There's actually quite a few broken light bulbs here. They've been broken for years. No one's got around to replacing them yet. But there's enough light to see, so what's the problem? And you can see, I don't know, other mistakes here. You can see on the that fake paving on all the walkways, some of it's chipped off. It's good enough. So see if you can restrain the fault-finding mind as well. And then after a while, things like sloth and torpor and restlessness. It's the sloth and torpor means you've been thinking too much. Your brain is tired. And you can expect that to happen the first few days of this retreat. You live out there in the world, and there's lots to think about, lots of problems to be solved. And yet it's your job, you get paid for that. And it's hard for the brain to actually to get out of that habit. Now this beautiful sense, this is good enough. I'm not at work today. I don't own jhana growth, so I'm not going to work here. I think you paid a fee, didn't you, a bond or something to be able to stay here. So it's not your job anymore. Someone else does it. Excellent. So you can relax and just don't think too much. Then your sloth and torpor get very less, more energy, more awake. Those sorts of hindrances can be lessened through the practice of wisdom. And then when it happens, automatically they just really go. Yes?
Ajahn, since you mentioned that Anita Mojari is not a Buddhist, so I think she never practiced meditation.
No.
So can I jump to the conclusion that every one of us will experience the jhana at the time of dying, and we will, no matter you practice meditation or not.
So you don't have to be here, go to bed. No. It's limited, yes. But then what happens is to be able to actually to get into that nimitta and to turn it into a jhana, that's a tough one. And that's one of the reasons why if you can practice that while you're still alive, it makes the whole process of death not scary anymore, understandable, you know exactly what to do. And you kind of get used to these brilliant experiences. I haven't mentioned this yet to you. I think I mentioned it slightly. But actually to enter these jhanas, I don't know why people feel like this, but it's a bit much for them. They get fear coming up. Even though these are the most beautiful experiences and beneficial experiences that you'll ever have in your whole life, plurals, that still it's a bit much for us. We're not used to it, number one. And number two, it's like I said this morning, it's like you have to vanish to actually enter it properly. And you're not ready to disappear, you're not ready to really experience what something like anatta is. I don't mean figure it out intellectually, but actually just practice it for a few moments, just disappear. And that's scary for many people. That's why one of the similes the Buddha gave us, a brilliant simile. It's like somebody walking, maybe at night time, down one of the paths in the forest, alone. And then these two big murderers jump up at either side of you. You'd be scared, you'd be terrified, you'd think you're going to lose your life. That's like when your sense of self, which is only a fake sense of self, sort of starts to get threatened. It's like you feel you're being murdered. You won't be murdered. It's beautiful bliss is there just right in front of you. And I know this monk, and when he was getting really, really close to these jhanas, they can see just almost like the beautiful bliss was just one step in front. Should I? No, it's a bit scary. It's too much power, too much energy, too much bliss. What will I do? They say, no, I can't. It looks too nice, but I can't. Oh, what the heck, I'm going for it. That's an approximation, but that's sometimes what it's like. And after a while, you just let yourself go into it and realize it's totally safe. So full of so many insights and understandings of who you are. And even, I don't care if you're not Buddhist or whatever you are, you will start to recall, if you want to, who you were before. Were you a woman before or a man? Were you Chinese before or Indian? Where were you living before, Freddie? Are you afraid of that? But anyway, that information is ready for you, like pressing a button. Oh, that's where I was before. This is post-jhana. Oh, myself, am I going too deep? Am I scaring you? No, I can go deeper, good. Now that sometimes, I'm just being personal now, sometimes I just wonder how deep should I teach? And because sometimes it can be scary for people. I never continued on that story of that monk Sudama, but after checking him out and the real deal, he was actually teaching some meditation in Wat Bhawan. I forget which afternoon. And one of my friends, she was a Thai lady, but brought up in UK. She married this guy who went to the same school as I did. And so, we got to know each other. She went to this monk every, I don't know, maybe Thursday afternoon or something, to practice meditation. And he was a good teacher. But then one day, we're meditating here. Imagine this was happening to you. We're meditating here, and then you'd feel that something strange happening. So she opened her eyes, and say it was this monk over here. She opened her eyes and saw from this monk these laser lights coming out of his eyes onto one of the other meditators. Now, I just gained nothing from making these things up. This is real, true. I was not there, but this was a woman who I trusted implicitly, known her for years. And she just would not lie about this. She saw laser lights coming out of a monk's eyes. And what happened? Would you like to see that? Thank you, you're honest. She freaked out. She got up from her seat, left the room and never went back. And that is often what happens. You might just sort of kind of see it exciting, see something different, something you can go home and tell your friends about. But if it really does happen, it's some of the freakiest thing you can ever see. Do you want to see it? Okay, go ahead. Okay. The next question? Is that a question there? Or you just put your hand up? Oh, that was your what is that, a sheep or a dog?
Doggy.
Doggy, okay, yeah. Sometimes I can't tell the difference these days. Dog, sheep. It must be a sheepdog. Any other questions? Yeah.
This is my first retreat and I'm not familiar with the jhana system, so I was wondering when you mentioned about the experience like when the senses is very sensitive.
Yeah?
Is that this part of one of the jhana or is actually way before the jhana?
Yes, it's before the jhanas. If the senses are very, very sensitive, like they've been amplified. I haven't mentioned this yet. There's so many other interesting parts of meditation. Just before your senses, especially your sense of touch, starts to vanish, your senses become very, very sensitive. Many times people feel like there's ants crawling over you. It's really, not really disturbingly itchy, but you can feel every bit of your skin. It's like your senses, again, have been cleared and exaggerated. And if you do feel that, please, that's a good sign. Because afterwards, they just vanish and disappear totally. It's like before they turn off. That's what they experience, that's what they're feeling like. And once they do start to turn off, then, the hard work is done. And it's very pleasurable from that time on. And that's one of the reasons why I would love all of you to enjoy meditation. And you're getting in there and you're sitting and just blissing out. And then you see nimittas and you really go for it. And then eventually you can't do it. You have to let it happen, as I keep saying. And then when it does happen, okay. I know Venerable Karunika knows this lady, that please don't let people know who she is, she's still alive. And she went on one of my retreats, this was over in Thailand years ago. And she's a very smart woman, and a very good disciple. And then she was on this retreat, she was doing a lot of meditation, not trying to get somewhere, but then at the end of the retreat, she hadn't got very much at all. And that's when she realized that her taxi to take her to the airport at the end of the retreat wasn't going to arrive for another hour. So she had an hour free. So she decided to go back into the hall, the meditation hall, to kill time. That's what she told me. She went there to kill time. Not breaking precepts, it's just like a way of speaking, kill time. But when she came out from the hall, that's what, even just thinking about it, remembering it, now always brings me a lot of joy. When she came out from the hall, I think it wasn't a cup of tea, I think it was an apple juice or something, because it's in Thailand, it was hot. And she was a lay person still. She was on her knees, she had her hands up like this. Ajahn Brahm, lost, it's wonderful, Could you hear that? She was like an emotional. The only idea I could have, to try and describe it to you, it's like someone who's just fallen in love. But it wasn't with anybody else. It was her first experience of deep meditation. That was the afterglow. It's so nice, so wonderful. That's so sweet. And she did it right at the very end. She was killing time. She wasn't trying to get anywhere. Wasting the time. That's what she thought. It's a wonderful thing to do. Not try. But I say there is a danger to meditation. Her danger, she had to face it, was she lost all her hair. She became a bhikkhuni. She never thought she'd do that. It was so powerful. Nothing else really mattered afterwards. So be careful. If you don't want to lose your hair. Okay, as usual, gone on too long. Can I finish now? Okay. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you.